Thank you for joining us as we take a look at Unit 1, an introduction to the basics of human geography. Before we get started, just a quick reminder that this is designed to be a review or a refresher of material previously learned. It's not designed to teach you everything about the subject. We refer you back to your textbook and your class notes if you need more detailed information. Where something occurs is known as the spatial perspective. Geographers consistently ask the question, the why of where. Why did that occur there? These are the 5 themes of geography. You could consider these much as different lenses on a camera, and we will look at the world through the different lenses of these 5 different themes. The first theme is location, and here what we're concerned with is where something is, and that where it is has an impact on how we lead our lives. Site and situation are important terms in describing location, and these can be confusing. Site simply refers to the internal characteristics of a place. Virginia Beach, for example, is located on the Chesapeake Bay in the Atlantic Ocean. It's at sea level with little variation in altitude. Situation refers to external characteristics. What's nearby? What makes this place attractive? Virginia Beach is 3 hours south of Washington, D.C., and is a tourist attraction. The theme of place addresses the question of what's it like there? The unique combination of both physical and cultural or human attributes give each place its unique stamp. You may remember in class when we took a look at the sense of place that we had for Virginia Beach. And it turned out we all had different senses of place because our different perceptions of Virginia Beach's attributes. Regions are an important concept within human geography. These are spatial units that share some type of similar characteristics. There are 3 types of regions that we are going to look at: formal, functional, and perceptual. Formal regions are areas that have common cultural or physical features. The city of Virginia Beach is a formal region. Within the city boundaries, all the citizens share being subject to Virginia Beach rules and regulations. Salem High School School District is also a formal region. Within that region, we share attending Salem High School. The state of Texas is a formal region for much the same type of reasoning. Functional regions are groups of places linked together by some function's influence. For example, it could be the readership area of a particular newspaper or the viewing area of a particular TV station. And often the influencing function spreads out from a central node or origination point. Unlike formal or functional regions, perceptual regions are determined by people's beliefs or perceptions, and as such is not formalized. For example, regions within the United States. What is the South? Where does the West begin? Is Texas Southern, Western, or is it something unique called Southwestern? These are often called vernacular regions. Movement in space is also something that geographers analyze. In this particular picture, we're looking at the paths that hurricanes have taken over the last 50 years or so. But we also take a look at how people move through space, and we'll talk more about that when we get to migration. How the environment impacts how humans live has been the subject of great debate. The idea of environmental determinism suggests that the environment determines what your culture is going to be like. A given environment will result in a given culture. This idea has been replaced with possibilism. Under possibilism, the environment does provide some limits, but humans can operate and make decisions within those limits. Climate is a long-term weather condition at a particular location. and it can have a significant influence on how we lead our lives. For example, the type of housing, clothing, even food that is available can be dictated by climate. Distribution refers to the arrangement of a particular feature within space. And we'll take a look at three components of this distribution: density, concentration, and pattern. Density refers to the frequency with which something occurs in space. The example I generally use is the number of desks in my classroom. The three types of density which we are interested in are arithmetic density, physiological, and agricultural. In arithmetic density, we simply take the number of people and divide it by the available land area. In physiological density, it's similar, but we take the number of people and divide it by the available arable land that can be farmed and lived on. And finally, agricultural density, we're looking at the ratio of the number of farmers to the amount of arable land. I always use Egypt as my example in describing these different types of density. Now, Egypt is a large country with a large population, and the arithmetic density simply involves taking the 95 million people and dividing by the 390,000 square miles, which gives us an arithmetic density of 243 people per square mile, and that's not particularly dense as far as a large country goes. But there's a problem here. And that problem is that although Egypt is a large country, it's mostly desert. Matter of fact, its arable land only is 2.9% of available land. The physiological density of Egypt presents a much different picture. We take the same 95 million people, but we divide it by the much smaller amount of arable land. This gives us a population density of over 8,000 people per square mile, much more densely packed than the arithmetic density displayed. In this population density map, you can see where the people of Egypt actually live, as they live in the areas that can be farmed, which is based on the Nile River and the Nile Delta. And finally, the agricultural density gives us the idea of how many farmers there are per available arable land. And this gives us an idea of how efficient they are. The higher number of farmers shows a less developed nation with less efficient, less mechanized farming tools. You should remember that the ecumene is the portion of the Earth's surface occupied by permanent human settlement. Another component of distribution is concentration, or how a feature is spread over a space. If density is the number of desks I have in my classroom, 28, then concentration refers to how they're spread out. Are they evenly spread out, or they're all packed into a single corner? Again, concentration. And another feature of distribution is pattern, which is the geometric arrangement of objects in space. The township and range system resulted in these square patterns in many Midwestern towns and counties. The space-time compression refers to the compression of the amount of time it takes to get from one point to another. For example, in Columbus's day, it would take about 6 weeks to get from Europe to North America. Today, a flight can do it in a matter of hours. Distance decay refers to the idea that the further away you are from a location, the less that location has an influence on you. So in other words, the further away from Virginia Beach, the less I'm influenced by Virginia Beach customs and news. Globalization refers to the idea that something becomes worldwide in scope. This could be both cultural or economic or trade. Diffusion is the process by which a characteristic spreads from one place to another. A hearth is the place from which an innovation originates. In this diagram, or in this image, we're looking at the hearth of Buddhism in northern India. Relocation diffusion simply refers to an idea that moves from one place to the other with people physically moving from Asia to North America, for example. You bring with you your culture, your food, etc. Expansion diffusion is the type of diffusion in which an idea spreads from one place to another in a snowballing process where it gets larger and larger. There are three types of expansion diffusion: hierarchical, contagious, and stimulus. Hierarchical diffusion, which is the lower of the two examples, follows a hierarchy or an order, and it goes from the higher order to the lower order. When we talk about popular culture, the hierarchical order would be large world cities such as Tokyo or New York, and the idea is spreading from those to the next order of cities and then eventually to the rural areas. Contagious diffusion is much like catching a cold. Whoever you come in contact with, that concept or idea spreads to them. In stimulus diffusion, the idea spreads, but not necessarily all the details. And the best example would be McDonald's in a place like India. So the idea of a McDonald's and fast food and how it's done spreads, but not everything, not the actual menu. Here we see the menu of a McDonald's in India featuring various types of veggie burgers. Geographers always want to know where something is, and this is described by location. Absolute location uses some type of geographical coordinate system, the best known of which is latitude and longitude. You should be comfortable with the concept of latitude and longitude. It's absolute location because there is only one location that answers that particular description. It is not relative to anything around it. Relative location has to do with some location compared to other places. Virginia Beach, for example, is 3 hours south of Washington, D.C. It's not the only place that could be considered 3 hours south, but again, its location is relative to Washington, D.C. You should be comfortable with geographic coordinates. Lines of latitude running east and west are called parallels. Lines of constant longitude running north and south are known as meridian. The zero meridian is called the prime meridian and passes through Greenwich, England. The geographic coordinates known as latitude and longitude are measured. Latitude is measured from 0 to 90 degrees north and south from the equator, while longitude is measured from 0 to 180 degrees east and west of the prime meridian. 180 degrees west longitude is generally referred to as the international dateline. There are a number of different ways in which we try to represent our three-dimensional planet on a two-dimensional sheet of paper known as a map. There are, again, a number of different ways, Mercator projections, etc. But one thing you do need to realize is all maps have some kind of distortion. The Mercator projection is a particular type of map or chart often used for navigation. It has a particular advantage for that because on any Mercator map, a line of true bearing can be determined by drawing a straight line on the map. However, because all maps do have distortion, the Mercator projection has greater distortion the further you get away from the equator. So areas far away from the equator appear to be disproportionately large. You should be comfortable that cartographers are those who construct maps, and that maps are classified into two broad categories: reference maps and thematic maps. Reference maps tend to show natural and human-made objects and generally have an emphasis on location. This example shows the state of Virginia with major highway systems. Thematic maps follow a particular theme or a particular concept. For example, in this one, we see population, you could use climate, city size, etc. An isoline map displays some value on a single line. So all along that line, you have that value. On this weather map, if you look at the line that features the number 80, it's 80 degrees all along that particular line. A choropleth map displays some variable using various colors or degrees of shading to show the differences in, for example, population density. A proportional symbol map uses the size of the representative symbol to represent the frequency of a variable. On the map to the left, the larger the skull and crossbones, the more highway fatalities. Map to the right, the larger the cow, the more cattle sales occur in that county in Maryland. The dot density map simply uses dots to represent the frequency of something, so the greater the collection of dots, the more frequent that variable occurred. A cartogram is a unique type of map because it uses proportionality to show a particular variable. Here in this map, population is displayed, and as a result, China and India are significantly larger than they would be on a regular map. You might notice that Canada and Norway and Russia are much smaller. Again, the size of the country is based on its population. Each map will have a map scale, which gives you some idea of the reduction that has taken place. For example, 1 inch on the map may represent 1 mile on the Earth. You should be comfortable with the idea of a large scale equaling a small area and a small scale equaling a large area. So a map that has a scale of 1 inch is equal to 4 miles covers a much smaller area than a map where 1 inch represents 400 miles. Again, 1/4 is a larger fraction than 1/400th, so the larger scale, smaller area, and vice versa. Geographic information systems are computer-based map systems that allow you to place layers of data on top of each other. So we may have a map that shows Virginia Beach physical features, and we overlay that with a map showing where the roads are, and another map showing where housing is, and another map showing population density. And again, being computer generated, these layers can be created and provide quite useful information. Global positioning systems, or GPS, help us identify location on Earth using a series of satellites whose signals are compared and give us our location, whether through a GPS system or our phones, that are actually very accurate.